So this is how to cover mistakes when you're playing by ear. I'm using Mac Miller's song Knock Knock for this. I just picked it up there, so I'll be making a couple of mistakes in that naturally. This one is just a really simple one. If you're familiar with the song, the sample is just like... and it just repeats. And then I think the verses kind of go into something like... something like that in the verses. So the chords are D, E minor, G, and A, and it's in the key of D major. So first of all, pick a song that you're going to be practicing these kind of techniques with. For me, it's this one. You can pick whatever one, say one that you're practicing at the moment maybe would be ideal. First thing, you have to know the key of the song. You probably already do, but if you don't, know what key you're in. In this case, we're in D major. As well as that, know every chord that you're playing. So in this case, I'm only using 4 chords. And most of the pop songs that you'll be playing, even most rock songs, you'll only be using 3 or 4 chords. I'm going to make a disclaimer about this as well. This is only applicable for major keys and not really jazzy keys. Most of the pop and rock songs that you hear, like popular ones in the charts and stuff, all of them will pretty much be okay with this. But the proper, like, I don't know, if it's in like an A minor 7 type key, you can probably apply some of the principles, but they're not going to be that effective. So yeah, learn the key first. Know exactly what chords you're using for the song. So in this case, we're only using 4 chords: D major, D minor, G, and A major. As well as that, there might be a bit of a hassle, but learn the scale of whatever key you're playing. So in this case, it's D major. And be able to play it really fast and in, I don't know, even like 2 octaves. If you can. It doesn't have to be like proper grade standard, like learn the exact fingering and stuff, but just know the notes of the scale and learn those notes, because the reason for that is when you know those exact notes, you know that they're the only notes that you're going to be playing, and any other notes that fall out of that place. So for example, B flat in this case, I should not play that note because it's not in the key. It seems obvious, but when you're really familiar with the scale yourself, you'll develop muscle memory, and then you'll kind of develop the ability to literally automatically avoid those keys when you're playing the song. So first steps, know those things and be really familiar with the scale. I've broken this down into 3 major mistakes that you often end up making when you're playing by ear. Now these apply to sheet music as well, but mainly by ear. So the first one is just playing a wrong melody note. Hopefully at this point, if you end up playing a wrong note, it's most likely in the key, which can pass as a thing called ornamentation. If you don't know that, it's what jazz musicians use all the time to kind of jazz up every piece. It's even used a lot in classical music. But basically, say you'll know the main melody of the sample now. So say the first note of what I'm trying to play is this. If I happen to play this A note, which often happens, like you kind of just accidentally press a note beside it, I can now just pass that off as ornamentation, and people won't really notice too much. So people will assume that you're kind of making your own different rendition of the song, when in actual fact you've pressed a wrong note. See, this piece, the sample, it repeats so much, so it has such distinctive melody notes that there's not a lot of room for errors. That's why it's a kind of a good piece to use, this one. So if you can kind of pull that off, you can definitely use this for other pieces. Now the other extreme, if you happen to hit a bum note that's not in the key of D major or the key that your song is in, there's a thing called chromatic scales that are supposed to play literally every note of the piano. So say from D to D. And I know, for example, like Billy Joel uses it in Piano Man before it starts. You can, if you kind of wanted on the spot, just pass it off as a type of chromatic thing that you're doing. So say it's... So that's kind of a more obvious mistake when the note is just outside of the key. But it does work, especially if you slow it down and you just decide on the spot to just make that into a bit of a chromatic scale. As long as you land on the right note, that's pretty much the key. It's not so much about pressing the right note on the exact spot where it should be played. It's more like kind of the journey to getting to that right note. So if that means that you've accidentally pressed a lower one here or there, just bring it up to the right note and emphasize the right note whenever you're on it. All these tips kind of do take practice, but once you kind of know them and have them under your belt, they're so handy for when you're playing in front of people. I'll say now as well, the main underlying tip out of all of these tricks really is confidence. If you kind of just portray that you've done whatever you did on purpose, people will just assume that you're making up your own rendition, and they'll often just like it and kind of commend you for changing it up. As long as you do it with confidence, it's when you kind of clam up and stop playing, that's when attention is drawn and people feel sorry for you then, where you don't really want that to happen. So the next mistake that you can sometimes make, if you can even call this a mistake, if you're just, especially when you're playing by ear, if you're not sure what bit comes next, so say if I've finished my sample part of this song, so and then it should go into the verses, but I'm not sure what chords come next. Especially if you're playing by yourself, like a solo piece, the first thing you can do is slow it right down and often just land on the root note. When you know your scale, you can kind of play just whatever notes you feel and slow it right down, catch a breather before going in, and hopefully it will come back to you then. It does get a bit nerve-wracking when you do this. The longer you wait, the kind of more panic you get in your head. The less you show that feeling, the better. But it does happen to all of us. But if you slow it down and give yourself a bit of time and just assume, okay, everyone just thinks that I've done this on purpose, before you get together and you're like, okay, no, this is what I actually don't even know what comes next in that song. It's pretty similar, to be honest, but you get the picture. The other thing you can do as well, if you are not sure of what comes next and you still don't know by the time you've gotten to this random kind of glide of scale notes, you can just go ahead and reuse what you've just already done, but don't play the right hand melodies. So just use the 4 chords that we're playing now, which are D, B minor, G, and A. And if you kind of want to make it kind of more simple for yourself, just use block chords like that. People will think it's just an extra little bit you've added into the song. As well as that, what you can do is just literally make up your own different melody on the right hand. Often I like to maybe slow it down and just play random notes that are in the chord you're playing with the left hand. So for D, it doesn't even have to be like necessarily in those chords, as long as the main notes you're playing with the right hand. So like, for example, this little trick here, including E, works because I'm kind of using E as a stepping note, but my main source is still these D major notes here. This trick will also help for coming up with your own melodies and just writing songs as well. If you get in the habit when you're kind of practicing to just jam out in whatever key you're in, learn 4 chords and just improvise, just play the chords, and over time you end up just getting better at just making melodies. You just use different tricks like playing with octaves, ornamentation, scales and stuff like that. That's kind of a long-winded explanation of what to do when maybe you might clam up or you're not sure what comes next. And the last mistake then that's kind of commonly made, if you play a wrong chord, so not even a note, but if you actually constructed that you've played a different chord than you're supposed to, hopefully at this stage you know that there's only like 3 or 4 chords you're using in the whole tune, so it won't sound too out of place. It's a bit of a different story if you're in the key D and you end up playing like an A flat chord or like E flat minor or something. But even still, like literally, there's tricks to just glide that back into place. But say for instance, you're playing this. So for example, you probably wouldn't have noticed, but I played different chords there that I should have played G first and then A. And often that happens with kind of major keys. It's not like instantly recognizable when you've made a mistake, especially for just average people who don't even play instruments watching you perform. They're gonna have no idea. Say if you've made like more of an obvious mistake, like yeah, so I'm supposed to go to a minor chord there, and say if instead I went to a major chord there, that should have went to B minor instead of A major. What you can do is just again use the same kind of principle as if you played a wrong note. If you're landed on A, just glide it back up to B minor. Even still, say if you wanted to keep up the pace of it and you're not really feeling slowing down, just literally ignore the mistake you made, because half the time they're not going to know. If it sounds slightly different, they're going to just think that it's on purpose, or they might even question hearing it themselves. I made a few mistakes there. So yeah, if you just keep playing, I know like we're zooming in on an overview shot of like the correct notes and what I should be playing. So everything here is amplified, but when you're playing in front of people, they're not looking for mistakes really. They're looking mainly to kind of support you and nod along and just kind of enjoy themselves as well. They're not really, most people aren't kind of there to critique every performance that's going on. So again, it comes back to confidence. If you just kind of play with confidence, these tricks shouldn't worry you. The worst thing you can do is stop and clam up and look nervous and sweaty and stuff, which it's easier said than done, but the more you practice kind of just yourself with mulling over mistakes, the more you'll get better at it in public. So they're pretty much the 3 tips that I have. There might be more that come to mind. It's just they're the ones that I was thinking of there. If you can think of anything yourselves, write them down, and I may end up making more of these videos if they kind of go down well. I know they're not really like conventional tricks, as in I can definitely picture people looking down on what I'm saying here, especially kind of professional piano players, but I definitely think they're such good tricks. They've helped me just performing in front of people. Yeah, people really don't know. And another disclaimer, this is really for live performances. Like I wouldn't recommend leaving mistakes in when you're kind of putting up covers on YouTube and stuff like that, because that's when the comments do start coming in and being like, no, hang on, these are wrong notes that you're playing, or like that chord is wrong or whatever. So I'm not recommending in that case. It's more for when you're playing in front of people and you're playing at a party or whatever, or you're playing on stage, that sort of thing. Let me know if anything else comes to mind and what you think.
Thanks for watching, and if you have a song in mind that you really want to know how to play, let me know about that. Follow me on social media as well. It could motivate me more to grow this channel. Thanks again.